In this world, the rules were written by tyrants. The crown was handed to those with the right last name, the right bloodline, the right devotion to their false god. Recognition wasn't earned, it was inherited through obedience. And the man who guarded that kingdom, he wore virtue like an armor, but his greatest weapon wasn't courage, it was a golden shovel. He smiled like a hero, spoke like a saint, but buried anyone who dared to rebel against the empire he helped build. And then came an outcast. He didn't carry a sword, because he didn't need one. That night, he walked in with rebellion in his blood and a microphone in his hand. And from the top of that ramp, sitting cross-legged, he dropped a pipe bomb that shattered the silence of a generation. He started a riot that is still raging to this day. He spoke not just for himself, but for every fan who was tired of being lied to, every voice they tried to silence. And their polished knight, the chosen hero, could only lie on his back as the fire of revolution caught flame around him. One man was everything WWE wanted us to see: hustle, loyalty, respect. The other was everything they tried to bury: resentment, rebellion, refusal, and fan frustration. And in the red-hot crucible of Chicago at Money in the Bank, they clashed in a match that rewrote the rules of what wrestling could be. It was a movement, a moment where everything felt real. That war raged for months, but ended under the most unfortunate circumstances. But fate has a cruel memory, because in 2025, it brought them back, not as echoes of who they were, but as warped reflections of everything they tried not to become. The man who used to be the voice of the voiceless is now the voice of TKO, a company man in rebel's clothing. The pipe bomb mouthpiece who once dared to speak the truth now speaks in the language of corporate greed and hypocrisy.
Muhammad, I sincerely apologize to you and of Saudi Arabia.
But ironically, he's the last chosen warrior of the kingdom he once tried to burn down. And somehow, he may be the only one left who can stop what's coming. Because the man he once warned us about, the face of the machine, is no longer wearing the mask. The man who told us to never give up, gave up on every principle he preached. He's no longer a hero, no longer a savior. He's now the reckoning, and he's ready to end his career with the title in hand and a smirk on his face, while wrestling's soul burns behind him as he walks out. But still, he is the only one making sense. In a world of corporate slogans and commercially driven storylines, it's him who now speaks for the fans. He's the one dropping pipe bombs. He's the one pointing at the rot. The lines have blurred. The rebel has become the guardian. The hero has become the monster. The yin has become the yang. This is the story of a rivalry that shaped a generation. The story of a man who sparked the first flame of rebellion and now stands at the edge of extinguishing it. The story of a man who carried the company on his back for 2 decades and now threatens to ruin it forever. This is the story of CM Punk versus John Cena. Our story begins in a town where nothing remarkable had ever happened, until it did. There was a kid with a dream far too big for his pin code, but that didn't stop him. He made a cardboard cutout of the championship belt and pretended to be a world champion. In the years that followed, he chased that dream to the bitter end. He hustled through odd jobs just to make ends meet, grinding in the ring every chance he got. He spent countless sleepless nights, sometimes in his car, sometimes in the gym, until he finally earned his shot on the biggest stage of them all. A WWE developmental deal is where most think the struggle ends. But for John Cena, it's where the real fight began. He was thrown into a pool of sharks: Lesnar, Batista, Randy Orton. But somehow, he stood out just enough to get the call-up. His debut? A high-profile segment opposite Kurt Angle, where he barked back with ruthless aggression. But here's the truth. He wasn't meant to be great. He wasn't handpicked. He didn't look special. He didn't have the pedigree. In fact, he was on the verge of being fired, until a backstage freestyle saved his job. His rapping skills bought him time. The crown was always meant for someone else, but one by one, the chosen one slipped through Vince's fingers, until all that remained was Cena. What followed was a generational run. WWE had seen dominance before, but Cena redefined what it meant to be the face of the company. Every night, he was the first one in and the last one out. He signed every autograph. He met every Make-A-Wish kid. He won everything this business had to offer, and through the company's darkest days, he stood tall, like a mountain with a smile on its face, until the storm arrived. WWE has always run on a stubborn kind of faith. There are sacred rules you're not supposed to break, orders everyone must follow, lines no one's allowed to cross. But CM Punk never believed in any of it. He carved his name through the indies, fought in bingo halls, clawed his way into relevance until his voice got too loud for WWE to ignore. He didn't walk like a star. He didn't talk like a product. He fought like every match was his last. He spoke like he was whispering gospel in a room full of liars.
Your arms are just too short to box with God.
In an era where everything was polished and PG, where characters felt like plastic knockoffs, he was raw. He was real. Maybe too real. He was always a troublemaker, always the rebel, always the loudmouth. And he made sure the people at the top knew exactly how he felt. Only a few saw the potential in him. For a while, it looked like this was the end of the road. But then, he was handed a microphone, and a live mic in the hands of a man with nothing left to lose. That was the night CM Punk changed wrestling forever. Cena and Punk were always polar opposites. One held the keys to the kingdom, the other tried to burn the gates down. One smiled through press tours, carrying the company on his back. The other carved his name in brick walls and broken rules. Cena was the machine. Punk was the virus. But when they met, the system always shook. Every stare down felt like an earthquake. Every match, a message. Every promo, a bullet. They weren't just rivals. They were philosophies in flesh. Punk stood for the unheard. Cena stood for the unshaken. And each time they touched, they left scorch marks behind. In 2011, Punk dropped a pipe bomb that shattered the fourth wall and shattered Cena's aura along with it.
There's one thing you're better at than I am, and that's kissing Vince McMahon's ass.
With those words, he didn't just spark a feud, he sparked a revolution. But the revolution didn't go as planned. Punk didn't survive the machine long enough to rewrite it. The system chewed him up, his fire faded, and though he never finished the story himself, the match he lit caught on. Daniel Bryan, Cody Rhodes, Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens. The rebels he inspired carried the torch when he couldn't. Meanwhile, Cena held the empire on his shoulders. Through eras of silence and suffering, he marched forward, until even he ran out of wars to fight, and Hollywood came calling. That should have been the end, but destiny has a cruel memory, because now, 14 years later, the story has found its final page, and the roles, they've reversed. Cena has returned, not as the clean-cut face of the company, but as its reckoning, not with slogans, but with scorn. He didn't just turn heel, he turned mythic. He cut his own pipe bomb, sat cross-legged in the ring, and fired every shot Punk once did, only twisted with venom.
You're no longer the voice of the voiceless, you're a friggin' millionaire.
And maybe he's not wrong. Because CM Punk, the man who once vowed to speak truth to power, the man who mocked the sellouts and condemned the machine, just accepted a match at Night of Champions in Saudi Arabia. The same Saudi Arabia he once condemned publicly. The same stage he ridiculed in this 2020 tweet against The Miz. In 2025, a lot of unexpected things happened. But CM Punk publicly apologizing, that wasn't on anyone's bingo card. Especially not from a man who never apologized to the elite. Never apologized to AEW's fanbase. Never apologized to Colt Cabana, the friend he set fire to on the way out. And yet here we are, Punk, humbled in an airport presser, trying to walk back words he once spat with conviction.
Muhammad, I sincerely apologize to you and of Saudi Arabia.
So what happens now? Now, history bends in reverse. In 2011, the company's biggest babyface walked into Chicago and got booed to hell. In 2025, the man who once tore the house down in that same city will walk into Saudi and hear those same boos rain down on him. The rebel will be hated, the tyrant will be cheered, because the lines are gone. And maybe that's the point. Maybe it was never about good or evil. Maybe the war between Cena and Punk was always about truth, and what happens when you hold on to it for too long. Punk wanted to change the world, Cena wanted to carry it, and both of them ended up becoming what they once fought against. At Night of Champions 2025, they meet one last time, not for nostalgia, but for the soul of what's left, for the last piece of the fire that once lit this industry from the inside out. This isn't just the end of a rivalry, it's the final mirror. Punk will walk in as the ghost of everything he swore he'd never become. Cena will walk in as the monster Punk warned us about. And the crowd will cheer for the monster, because after all these years, he's the only one still telling the truth. One last match, one last lie, one last war. The best in the world versus the greatest of all time. CM Punk versus John Cena. For everything they were and everything they gave us. If not Punk, then who ends Cena's reign? Click on the screen to find out. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more weekly deep dives.